All right, so for this chapter, what we're going to do is going to look at some alternate lighting of the same scene we've been working with, but now with sort of some different looks, and see how we can affect the look of our space, and different things we can do. So before on our last scene, we looked at this scene lit with a very sunset sky, and now we're going to look at more of a more direct light, more sort of afternoon sun look on the scene. So, as I said before, a good place to start is with your HDR. And just a reminder that that's why libraries of HDRs are so useful, because they can just provide you with the lighting scenes that you want, and the bigger your library, the more lighting that you can offer yourself. Of course, you can always do this with some other methods and just general skylights and other fills and more traditional CG lighting methods, but a large HDR library will really sort of provide you with the tool sets that you're going to need for your for this scene. So with that in mind, we're going to go ahead and select our HDR, and I'm going to select this one over here, which I've sort of pre-selected, and it's got a very afternoon sky look to it. Sort of, if we look at this in this viewport, let's sort of rotate around a little bit, see, like for example, what you could see of what it looks like. You can see there's some just some mountains, and I guess, and sort of blue sky, but high sun. Just to give you an idea. Um, all right. So what we're going to do is we're going to start at 0 degrees of rotation. It's always good to start from scratch. And we're just going to look at our scene this way. And I can even see it and hear that our sun is basically going to be right around there in this scene. So let's just first look at what this will give us right out of the box, just changing the HDR. I don't have any lights in this scene, so we're just going to render this without lights as we've done in the past. So still have the textures though, so we're just going to go with the textures and no lights. So I'm going to go ahead and hit render, and we'll see the results when we get back. All right, well, we're back, and well, this is, I love the fact that you can just change your HDR, and all of a sudden your entire mood changes in your scene. But let's just talk about what we have here. We can see that we've got some nice fills, and we've got a lot of reflection, as we know what it actually is specular, and that's mainly because our sky is so bright. We're not getting any direct sun, obviously, because we don't have any sun in here. And you can get shadows from HDRs. You're starting to see them here, but it's very, very hard to really get sharp shadows and everything else. So as we know, what we got to do is we got to supplement this with some CG light. So we're going to go ahead and add the CG light to this scene. But and you're wondering if all this reflectivity is important, but let's really see what the CG light does, and it may actually help to have that, and it'll negate the idea of reflectivity of the scene when we start putting it in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort of go in here, and what I've done in this scene is I have added a light source, and I've sort of but what I'm going to do, actually, sorry, what I'm going to do first is I'm going to try to rotate this HDR slightly. I'm not exactly pleased with the light coming in this direction here. I kind of want it to be here. So having already been through this, I'm going to go in here, and I'm going to rotate this by 25 degrees. Once I do that, the light is sort of placed in a sort of nicer area up there. But what I can do at this point is I'm going to go in, and I'm going to select my sun. And I've sort of placed my sun in a high position, sort of right off screen here. If you want to see, let me just actually, we'll go through this again like we've done in the past. So let's go ahead and hide our freeways. And you can sort of see the sun is up there, right? And what I've done is, okay, here's our sun, and I've increased the intensity pretty high. I made it at 3, and I've not made it so yellow. It still has some yellowness to it. It needs to offset the blue of the sky, so it still is good to have some warmth to your suns. But it's not that prominent. So now that I got that, and I'm going to turn it on. And for now, we see that the size of it is 30 meters, which is based on the last exercise we did. Let's go ahead and just cut that in half. We want this to be a sharper sun, so we're going to cut that in half. Let's go back and unhide our freeways. And we're going to do that now. And sort of see what the results of are after that. So now we're ready to render, and I will go ahead and render, and we will see the results. All right, so we're back, and we can see that the sun has really added an enormous amount to our scene. And remember, we sort of had a question about whether things were too reflective. Well, when you add this sun, it just sort of balances that out so much better. And the hot sun here, and you do see reflections here, and that's correct because you now understand that the sky is very bright and therefore would reflect on almost any type of surface. So shaded spots should have reflections of bright areas, and all of these sort of balance out. And plus, we had a very bright, we had a lot of reflectivity here, and all of that's gotten washed away with the sun because that's what the sun will do. It'll sort of balance everything out, and we're getting this great speck kick here from the sun, and it just sort of all marries together. And obviously, the other huge advantage that we have is the fact that the fill, or basically the bounce light off of this very bright street area here is totally illuminating the underside of these freeways. And this is all obviously with global illumination. There is no light source anywhere but the sky and the sun. And this is not directed towards any of that. And all that comes from bounce light. And that's basically the whole, I mean, this is, the pinnacle of what we want in terms of global illumination, especially for outdoor scenes, is to really get light to bounce around in a very natural way. And you can even see the shading of this area from the street on here, etc., that's happening on all the other scenes, and how the low level here is occluding, and so the sun can't really bounce around that much in there. So it's all really balancing itself out really nicely, and it's really great. There's only one thing that I'd like to do, and that is to make this sun, I still find it to be too soft. So we're just going to go ahead and try one more version of this, and we're just going to sharpen up that sun a little bit. And the easiest way to do that would be to go ahead and do that in the size, and we're going to take it from 15 to 5 and sort of see how that would work out, and give it a better look. So let's go ahead and render and see what our results are. All right, so here we are, and we can see that basically our sun has sharpened up a little bit, or our shadows have sharpened up. And there was some noise before, and we could have solved that noise by increasing these subdivisions here in our sun. But it's fine. I wanted it to be sharper too, so now that we have it nice and sharp, or sharper, the grain of this area is not as bad as it was. But this is a well-balanced scene, and we're sort of I'm pretty happy with this, and sort of gives you a good idea of things to look out for when you're doing some very sharp sunlit areas. Be really aware of sun and shadow. Shadow has to be significantly darker than sun. That's how you get your look of sharp, bright areas, is to have a high contrast between these two areas. And I think you've sort of achieved that in this scene, or we have achieved that in this scene. Okay, so now let's look at an alternate method of, let's look at yet another lighting scheme for our particular scene here. All right, so let's look at another alternate lighting situation. And we're back where we started, same scene, everything else. And we're going to start, on this particular one, I want to try to see if I can look at a scene with a much more overcast sky. So much more diffuse lighting. So we've sort of had our dramatic, backlighting from the sunset. We've had our strong afternoon sun. And now we want to look at very diffuse lighting. So again, I've picked another HDR that I want to use for this particular scene, and I'm just going to go ahead and pick it. And this particular HDR is a very overcast sky. I kind of like the way that the look is, and you can see it's actually got quite a bit of warmth in it. So it's probably more of a late afternoon sky, or early morning, but probably late afternoon it looks like. Gonna give it a few rotations so you guys can see some different views of it from different angles. But similar to the other one, but with just basically a lot more a lot more overcast on it, and lots of sun. So there's no direct sun really. I mean, the sun is barely able to come out of this spot here. But let's just go ahead and use this straight with no sun. And because it's an overcast sky, we'll probably not use the sun at all in the end, because we kind of want that that very soft diffuse light that we get from an HDR. So let's just first look at this as we've done in the past, just straight out render with just the HDR. So I'm going to go ahead and render this. All right, so here we go, and we've rendered a scene with just the HDR and no light. And as you remember from our last HDR, there was definitely something missing when we did that, and we didn't render with the sunlight, and that's because that HDR almost demanded to have a stronger light source. But this particular one does not demand that, and it really sort of demands this diffuse lighting, and all of a sudden it looks right off the bat. I mean, that's because it's a matter of context. So that's a good reason to have all these different HDRs for different concepts and different things in your library to do that. And just a reminder, the two HDRs that we've seen in these alternates, they both come from the SOCForm library. And it's sort of a great way to sort of look at different lighting situations and explore that concept. So, and I've mentioned them before in previous chapters. So go ahead and check out their libraries and really sort of get the ideas of what you want to do. But looking at this scene, I mean, it is a very diffuse light and kind of dull lighting, which is correct. I mean, it looks all good. But what I want to try to do now is I want to try to make this a little more exciting. And one thing that this gives me idea of is these clouds here. Let's pretend that these clouds are a post-rain cloud, and so let's pretend that it just rained, and so you sort of have that slickness on of moisture on this surface here, and sort of create that wet look. I used to live in Houston, so seeing wet concrete was something very familiar to me in these type of situations. So let's go ahead and do that, and we're going to do that by messing with the reflectivity of these things. So I've set up the similar scene, but just done a few shader tweaks, and we can look at that right now. All right, so got the same scene basically. It's exactly the same as the other one, except all I've done now is I've sort of adjusted some of the shader parameters on all the surfaces. And this is basically what I've done. We've taken our surface here on our streets, and or all the other parameters, and I've adjusted the reflectivity of these particular specular maps. And if we look at these like basically like this is actually, it would look like this. I've actually adjusted the output and the RGB offset of that image. And if you remember, basically our speculars look like this. And I've now tweaked them so that they all look a lot more powerful in terms of the whites. So I've pushed the whites really, really high, so they're a lot more reflective, keeping the same concept. And that's going to give me all the reflectivity that I want in these little zones. And I may be pushing it a little bit hard, but I think it all makes sense when we're actually looking at our scenes, because this is going to just give it that reflectivity. And if it's too hard for, I mean, it's a matter of taste, I guess, but if it's too hard, you guys can always dial it back. But I've done the same thing on all these other shaders as well. I've sort of pushed up the reflectivity of all the other shaders. And I've also taken the glossiness, and it used to be about a 0.75, and I made it slightly more glossy to give it a little less diffuse or less rough look, so it's a little more sheeny, from 0.75 to 0.8. So just push it up just a little bit, and we're gonna let's go ahead and see what that will give us. And again, I've sort of exaggerated the effect with the reflectivity just for discussion purposes, but I think that it'll give you a good idea of what we can do with these with this method. So we're going to go ahead and render and see what the results are. All right, so here we go. We have our nice slick street, and we've slicked it up quite a bit. You can definitely sense the sense of moisture or sheen off of the street, which is kind of nice. I can Having been from Houston, I can almost smell this. Doesn't smell very good. But anyway, pretty happy with the results here, and we've got the look that we're looking for. And again, like I said, you probably, if you wanted to dial this down, you could. It's all variables that we can adjust. And we're in pretty good shape. So what we're going to start looking at now is the concept of animation, which we haven't done. Everything we've done so far has been looking at stills. And so there's a few issues with animations, and we're going to look at some of those. And so let's go through those in our next chapters.